Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Terry, your host of Tim Travels. Welcome to another show. I want to see if I could get my co-driver on camera here. She's a little bit camera shy, but I'm going to give it a rip. Can you say hi, BB? See? I told you she's camera shy. Hey, hope everybody's doing well. I'm out west where the wind's been kind of high, and so it's time to be like super careful, especially if you got a light load. But I wanted to talk today. I promised earlier that I would talk about some considerations when you're thinking about moving to a different carrier. So the background is that you're a driver who's been with your first company for a year, maybe a little longer, maybe even longer than that, but you think it's time to move on for any number of reasons. Sometimes it is just pay. Sometimes it's professionalism. Like you want a different environment. You want an environment with a company that has lower turnover or better benefits or better routes or better equipment. There are any number of reasons why you might want to move to a different carrier. In my case, and if you watch my earlier videos about the companies I've worked for, I've moved twice because of professionalism and once just because of pay, because you got to put food on the table. So here are some things that you can look for when you start to go through this process. I think the first thing that always stands out to me are the recruiters for the company that you're talking to. If they can't call you back or they can't give you good information, that's your first impression of their company. If the people that are out there representing the company on a daily basis to non-employees of the company, to the public basically, don't have their act together, what is that going to say about the company itself? Another consideration is, where they're located, where their terminals are, what their policies are. Can you take your truck home? Are you going to have to, drive yourself home? What are some of the issues with that? How long do they expect you to stay out? Maybe you're wanting to change because you want to be home more. Well, then you don't want to get with a company that's not going to be able to get you home. How do they pay? A lot of companies, and this has happened to me, they have maybe a little bit better pay than you're getting per mile, and then they have some big bonus structure. But oftentimes those bonus structures are complicated. They require you to hit a lot of numbers that you don't have control over. I talked about one company I was with where I was out for an entire month and didn't get to 10,000 dispatched miles. Anybody who drives over the road will tell you that if you're out every day of the month, like you never went home and you were available the whole time, you should have hit 10 grand. I run on recap. I'm not a guy I don't like to do 34s away from home. So the fact that they couldn't get me to 10 grand was, that was on them. So those are several of the considerations you want to look at. You also want to look at benefits in terms of like, what are the waiting periods? Some companies have really lengthy waiting periods for you to participate in their benefits, whether it's healthcare or their 401k, something that might be important to you. I saw one company, they were like, oh, we pay great, we do this, but you can't participate in their 401k for a year. That seems excessive to me. My company, GP Transco, was 90 days. and then other benefits were either right away or pretty quickly after I got on board. In fact, I was up against the deadline to apply for some of the benefits that I like to take advantage of, and they were, they were good about prompting me, because, normally when I get to a company, I want to get through orientation and just, get on the road and make some money. So I remember they sent me several messages saying, hey, if you want to enroll in benefits, make sure you sign up before this date. So those are all considerations that I think you need to look at. The other thing too, though, excuse me, the other thing too is that there's a saying that the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. Well, that's a saying for a reason, because it's sort of kind of true. So you need to be very conscientious about your research, doing your due diligence, to check out the new company. The information you get on social media, whether it's YouTube videos or comments on Indeed or Glassdoor or some of those other hiring websites, those are good. But it's always great to hit up the person that's next to you at the fuel island and say, hey, how do you like working for X? I've learned a lot about a lot of companies, right then. Because most of the time those people will give you the straight skinny. They don't have an axe to grind. They're just like matter of fact about it. So that's another way to get information. And the other thing I would tell you is that you should be doing this with a goal in mind of at least 3 months of vetting, doing your due diligence, doing your research, talking to people, talking to recruiters. You can learn a lot in that time and then come up with a good decision. Now, let me say this: once you're finished deciding, you've kind of pulled the trigger, you're like, hey, I'm going to go to company X. A lot of companies, in fact, most companies ask for 2 to 4 weeks notice. Now, keep in mind, just because you signed a document saying you would give them 2 to 4 weeks notice, and this is kind of the lawyer in me looking at this, that doesn't mean you have to. And I'll tell you why. No truck driver that's non-union, which is pretty much all of us, if you don't work for UPS or a few of the other LTL carriers, I think, not Old Dominion, but ABF, I think, is union. You're an at-will employee. So what does that mean to be an at-will employee? And by the way, you probably signed a paper saying you're an at-will employee. What does that mean? Well, it means that you work at the will of the company and of yourself. So at will to the company means they can terminate you at any time for any reason or for no reason at all. They could just be like, I don't like the color of that person's hair, let's fire them. That's pretty much legal. I mean, they're not going to say they're firing you because you have a color hair that they don't like, but they can just terminate you, and they could do it with no warning. Now, the smart OTR company will make sure they get you back to a terminal before they fire you, but you may not see it coming. So what does that mean going the other way when you want to quit? Well, it means that you don't have to give them any notice. Now, it's nice to give people notice so you can have an orderly exit, but you need to understand that there are a lot of employers that when you give them notice, you say, oh, hey, I would like to leave. Let's say it's the first of the month and you're like, yeah, I'd like to leave on the 20th. They may say to you, oh, hey, thanks for that notice. You can leave today. Get your stuff out of the desk. Get your stuff out of your locker. Get your stuff out of your truck. So that's the danger, that they may just get rid of you immediately. The other danger is, and I'm not saying a lot of trucking companies do this, but I think some do, and I think, I've seen people that have said this, so I'm sure that there is some kind of truth to it. Some companies are retributive, meaning if you give them a chance, they'll put something negative about you in a DAC or some other report that's going to indicate to a follow-on employer that they had some problems with you. Don't give them a chance. If you have a really great relationship with a company, then leaving under controlled circumstances, meaning where there's some time, that's going to work, because there are a lot of good companies out there that just get it. But there are also companies out there that don't care. And so you have to understand who you're working for now and where you're going. And some companies get it. They say, hey, we know that you have X amount of experience, we'd like to keep you, but we just can't pay you what you want. And that doesn't, that's not a hit on them or you, it's just how it is. So if you're thinking about moving, understand those things. And the last thing I would say is, if you look at some industry publications, I recommend, looking at Freight Waves and some other stuff that you may see, although be cautious about where they get their content and who's sponsoring them. If a trucking company's sponsoring an article about themselves or about the industry that makes them look good, then you kind of have to question the conflict of interest. But my reading of some of the industry publications in the past couple weeks is that there's a shortage of capacity right now, and a lot of that capacity is driven by drivers availability. So it may be, if you're thinking about moving, it may be a good time to move to a company that you think is an upgrade. And that's another way of saying that it may be a seller's market. In other words, you're the seller. You're selling your services to a trucking company. That may be to your advantage. So take a look at that. If a company seems too desperate for drivers, and I don't have a good definition for desperate, but you can kind of feel it sometimes. If that's going on, that might be a good indicator that you need to look quite carefully at that carrier. Why are they so desperate? Is it because they just scored a huge contract and they just got a lot of work that they need to get done and they're going to need drivers? Or is it because they've had a bunch of people heading for the exits? That's the thing. If they have a high turnover because they can't take care of their drivers, then that's probably a company to stay away from. But again, it's always an individual decision. And as I've said earlier, people work at different companies for different reasons, and it's a personal decision. So I wish everybody the best of luck. If you like what you're hearing and you like our content, please subscribe, like, comment. Happy to answer any questions. I'll leave my email in the on the video, and like to hear from you. Good luck out there. Stay safe, and see you next time.